Shortly before 1 p.m. on a rainy September 20th, Mrs. Lyndon Johnson departed Washington's National Airport for a 4-day beauty and conservation tour, which would carry her across the length of the country for stopovers in California, Arizona, and New Mexico. Her companions for the trip, Secretary of the Interior Stuart Udall and his wife, Lee. For Mrs. Johnson, who normally travels tourist class on commercial planes, the early portion of the flight to the West Coast was not only an unaccustomed luxury, but probably one of the most unusual happenings in aviation history. Arranged by American Airlines, which chartered the First Lady's 727 jet, the fashion show featured the newest West Coast original from the Magnin specialty firm of San Francisco. Eventually, however, the doe-eyed models, the fashion coordinators, and camera-laden photographers all disappeared from the crowded aisles and took to the windows to enjoy some of the incomparable aerial views of the far west, including some memorable moments over the high peaks of the legendary Sierra Nevadas, fresh with their first snowfall of the year. By 3:30 in the afternoon, Pacific time, Mrs. Johnson's jetliner touched down at Hamilton Air Force Base near San Francisco. On hand to meet her were Governor and Mrs. Edmund Pat Brown of California. Less than 15 minutes after her arrival in the Golden State, Mrs. Johnson was airborne again, this time by helicopter, bound for the dedication ceremony that would formally designate the 53,000-acre Point Reyes Peninsula as a national seashore and park area. California history rings with great names in discovery and achievement: Cabrillo, Drake, Fremont, Vallejo, Stanford. Yet for all her dramatic past, she remains a land of endless challenge. For the modern Californian, two of the greatest challenges of the 20th century are his state's ever-expanding population and the growing need of his fellow citizens to respect and preserve as many land areas of uncluttered beauty as possible.
Every person wants a sense of place, and a place where he can be at repose. For many, many Americans, that place of refreshment will be land owned by all the people, parks, seashores, refuges of one kind or another. It is of paramount importance that we save and set aside enough sanctuaries for the future. The growing needs of an urban America are quickening the tick of the conservation clock. Let us dedicate Point Reyes National Seashore to the vitality of the American people and to generations yet unborn who will come here with the continent at their backs and gaze afar into immensity. Thank you so much for letting me share this time with you.
Just before sundown, Mrs. Johnson flew over the majestic Golden Gate Bridge toward the vibrant city of St. Francis, the city by the bay, San Francisco, blending its gold rush gusto and Nob Hill sophistication with the whistle of ships and clank of cable cars. Time, hard work, and ambition have made her the capital of commerce and queen of culture in Northern California. Mrs. Johnson's first day of her Western tour came to a pleasant close at the War Memorial Opera House, where she attended the opening night performance of the San Francisco opera season. Just before noon of the second day, Mrs. Johnson continued her aerial tour of California with one last look at Point Reyes Peninsula. Then her 727 jet swung inland over the lush fields of the Central Valley region, the largest and most important agricultural area west of the Rocky Mountains. At storied Lake Tahoe, the jet banked again, this time toward the sea and the old Spanish garrison town of Monterey. Curiously, for all of the Monterey Peninsula's past fame as a Spanish and Mexican colonial stronghold, many historic landmarks, such as Colton Hall, speak strongly to the Californian of freedom and independence.
Standing here at Colton Hall, the cradle of government in California, I am well aware of your proud past. I am impressed with what you have done to preserve its colorful history and bountiful beauty of the Big Sur country. Albert Schweitzer once said, "Man has lost the capacity to foresee and forestall. He will end by destroying the earth." I am not so pessimistic. And I know that the people of Monterey Peninsula know that conservation, beautification, call it what you will, is more than just one tree or one historic building or one scenic highway. It is a frame of reference, a way of life. You have lived it, and everyone who comes here is refreshed by what you have done. I want to contribute a small share, a chestnut tree seedling from the Thomas Jefferson mounds at the White House, to express my gratitude to the people of the peninsula for what you have done.
Just outside the city of Carmel, Mrs. Johnson made an unscheduled stop at the San Carlos Borromeo Mission. Beginning in 1770, this famous landmark had served as the headquarters for the zealous Father Serra, the founder of the chain of Franciscan missions which dot the landscape of California. Of all the roads that carry travelers up and down the coastal ranges of California, none offers more sheer excitement per mile than the Big Sur Scenic Highway, which soars for 80 miles along the western brink of the North American continent from the Carmel River to Morro Bay. This is the Big Sur country, a stretch of sculptured coastline famous for both its dramatic confrontation with the sea and for its artists and writers who have been drawn to its natural beauty. Standing near one of the most exquisite bridges in the West at Bixby Creek, Mrs. Johnson dedicated the Big Sur Highway and its wild symphony of mountain, sea, and sky to all who would come and share it. At mid-afternoon, the First Lady arrived at the place called Wild Bird, the self-designed retreat of California's noted architect and conservationist, Nathaniel Owings. There, resting from her tour, in a garden perched some 600 feet above the surf, Mrs. Johnson vicariously enjoyed another of the Big Sur's greatest treasures, privacy. The final daylight hours of Mrs. Johnson's second day in California brought her to La Cuesta Encantada, the enchanted hill San Simeon, the home and headquarters from which the late William Randolph Hearst ruled his far-flung publishing and communications empire. Closely guarded during his lifetime, San Simeon became legendary as the most mysterious private estate in America. 7 years after his death in 1951, the Enchanted Hill was presented to the state of California by the Hearst family for use as a state historical park and museum. Hearst, who loved to swoop up the great and near great of Hollywood and the political world and bring them to San Simeon, would probably have admired the daring do of Mrs. Johnson's final evening in California, as she met with over 500 guests, most of them scientists, educators, and conservationists. The background for the occasion was the lavish Neptune pool, with its flanking colonnade and Roman temple. Early the next morning, with her departure for the state of Arizona less than an hour away, Mrs. Johnson took time to tour through the echoing La Casa Grande. Here, in an almost eerie fairy tale atmosphere, are gathered many of the incomparable art treasures for which Hearst and his agents combed the world, often spending close to $1 million a year. Through the eons, as the great plateaus of the far west rose from the sea, the great land carver, the Colorado River, gouged the mesa rocks to gorge and chasm along her path. She dug great canyons and left their rims towering thousands of feet above her bed. She became as essential to the great seven-state area in the far west as the Great Lakes are to the industrial heartland of America. But while she gave the breath of life to the Old West, she also ravaged and destroyed. It wasn't until the 20th century that man began flinging giant barriers in her path to tame her and make her a servant to his will. Barriers whose names have changed the face of the land forever. Hoover, Flaming Gorge, Curacanti, Navajo, and the newest of these monuments to the sweat and skill of man, the Glen Canyon Dam in Page, Arizona. Rising over 500 feet from the canyon floor, its generators spin quietly as they pour out energy by the billions of watts into cross-country transmission lines. Behind the dam, a 186-mile-long lake, Lake Powell, is building a water reserve that will provide the West with the newest and finest scenic and recreational area in the nation. At 11 a.m. on September 22nd, Mrs. Johnson formally dedicated the Glen Canyon Dam.
America is only beginning to discover the natural beauty that is here. And our country is entering a new era of wise water conservation. I am proud to dedicate such a significant and beautiful man-made resource. I am proud that man is here. The hardcore water and power benefits of this dam are well known. Its bonus is the heavenly blue lake that begins here and winds its way through Navajo country toward the labyrinth of the new Canyonlands National Park. One cannot explore Lake Powell's 1,800 miles of shoreline in a hurry. But the places invite explorations. Places like Rainbow Bridge, Cathedral in the Desert, Hole in the Rock, canyons like Hidden, Driftwood, and Pickaxe. As one who has been shown many a lovely prospect, I still could not have foreseen the drama and the winning beauty of Lake Powell.
Just before 2 o'clock on the third day of the tour, called Faces of the West, Mrs. Johnson flew across the great Continental Divide into the Nacimiento Mountains of New Mexico. Her destination, Santa Fe, hub of the land of enchantment and the oldest seat of government in the United States. One of Santa Fe's outstanding contributions to the educational and cultural world is its Institute of American Indian Arts. Here, young Indian students from all over the United States participate in an accredited high school program in preparation for college, enrollment in technical schools, or employment in an art vocation. Strong emphasis is given to the art electives, encouraging individual creativity in cultural expression. It is a unique school, recognizing that most of its students come from communities and homes of great poverty, family breakdown, or social isolation. Its singular aim is to turn out truly creative and well-adjusted young people who can achieve satisfying economic and social success in the modern world. New Mexico was named for the land of the Aztec god Mexitli. Spanish conquerors came to the region from Mexico in 1540 to search for the gold of the mythical 7 cities of Cibola. They found only 6 small villages of Indians. They called the Indians Pueblo, the Spanish word for village. On the morning of her 4th and final day of her trip, Mrs. Johnson visited one of the famous pueblos of New Mexico, San Ildefonso, located 25 miles northwest of Santa Fe. The total membership of the San Ildefonso Pueblo is close to 300 people, most of whom live on the tribal land. They speak the Tiwa language and cling very strongly to the patriarchal family and clan relationship. Although most of the adults lack a formal education, a universal appreciation of art is most evident in their handmade goods. Two famous residents of the Santa Fe area, as far as the Johnson family is concerned, are Mr. and Mrs. Antonio Taylor, Mrs. Johnson's brother and sister-in-law. For years, Tony had been telling Mrs. Johnson about the fall beauty of the Carson National Forest with its golden aspen trees. So, during the final moments of her western tour, she journeyed to the fringe of the great Sangre de Cristo Range for a walk through the forest. A walk that would bring to a close the tour called Faces of the West. A tour which, in its entirety, might well be summed up in the words of Thoreau.
We must be refreshed by the sight of inexhaustible vigor, vast and titanic features, the seacoast with its wrecks, the wilderness with its living and decaying trees, the thundercloud and the rain which lasts 3 weeks and produces freshets. We need to witness our own limits transgressed and some life pasturing freely.